Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy, and here I love to talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 53, where I'll be sharing what I've been knitting for the past few weeks. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. I'm a knitter based out of Boston, Massachusetts. I love to mostly knit garments for myself. In today's episode, I'll be going over a handful of knit sweaters that I have on the needles. I'll be sharing my finished Inclinations Cowl and some updates on my Traveler Hoodie and Franky Sweater. So thanks for tuning in. I do want to take a few moments to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. I use Squarespace to build my website, any-knits.com, and love how simple it was to pick one of their pre-designed templates. With Squarespace's design intelligence, you can be empowered to create a website that is beautiful and tailored to your specific needs. With a Squarespace site, you can post blog articles, which is mostly what I use my website for, but you can also sell items like digital items, like knitting patterns, and with Squarespace courses, you can also sell online courses. So however you're trying to grow your online brand, Squarespace can definitely meet your needs. If you're interested in making your own Squarespace site, head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your site, head to squarespace.com/neknits and use the code NEKNITS to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video, and now we'll get into the podcast. So today I am wearing my Ingrid sweater, which was my main finished object in my previous episode. I have yet to wear it in an episode, so really excited to have it on today. The Ingrid sweater is a pattern by Petite Knit. It's an all-over textured sweater pattern, and I knit it out of Valley Yarns Northampton in the color Ocean Heather. So getting into finished objects. First up, I have my Inclinations Cowl. Really excited to have this off the needles and to show you guys. If you've been following along, you know that I have been loving my Inclinations Cowl. It is a pattern by Andrea Mowry, and it's an all-over half fisherman's rib pattern that's knit on the bias, knit flat, and then seamed up to create this cowl shape that has a point down the front center. It's designed to be knit out of 2 skeins of spin cycle dyed in the wool, which are color changing yarns that have a barber pulling effect, and I did use spin cycle for my Inclinations Cowl. I use these 2 colors together. Of course, you can use any yarn that has a similar style to these. There are a lot of substitutes out there for spin cycle, or of course you could knit it with a solid color yarn, but I really love how it turned out with the self-striping yarns. The first color I have here is called Overshadow, which is a blend of purples and some blues and teals. And the second color I used is called Nostalgia, which is mostly kind of like a dark maroon with some pops of teal in there as well. So together, I thought these would be an interesting pair. I thought that they tied together because of the teal color that you can see in both. And I love how these 2 knit up. Like, I'm still stunned at this fabric. It is absolutely gorgeous. I'm obsessed with it. I feel like the half fisherman's rib really blends the 2 colors together in such an interesting way. Like, from afar, it just looks like a really nice kind of like blended stripy pattern, but then up close you can see all of the details of the fabric. It just has so much dimension, and it's very bright but also very well blended. I'm just obsessed with how this turned out. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this pattern construction, it's knit flat and it creates this sort of pentagon shape that you end up seaming down the middle once you have finished blocking the piece of fabric. So you can see my seam here, and I say it's knit on the bias, but it's completely written into the pattern, so don't let that scare you if you're unfamiliar with that term. It's just some increases and decreases strategically placed like every other row at the end or beginning of the row to make your stitches kind of sit at an angle, which you can see here. And also in this pattern, there are built-in I-cord edges, so this really is a simple project to follow. There's not a lot of finishing besides that seam that goes at the end, and you can see how clean that those I-cord edges look on the fabric. The yarn is a sport weight yarn, and I ended up using 3mm needles to make my project. I was on gauge, even though I didn't do any gauge swatching. I just sort of cast on and hoped for the best. Once I was able to block my finished piece, I was able to pin it to the correct measurements in the pattern. So that is telling me that I met gauge pretty well. I will put it on so you can see what it looks like. I feel like it does take some zhuzhing to kind of get it to sit where I want, but you can see where the point sits in the middle here, right down the front of my chest. There is a lot of fabric, so if you're wearing this on a really cold winter day, which is kind of my intention for this accessory, it definitely has plenty of fabric to lift over your nose. Like if it's super windy and you need to cover your face, this is like excellent for that. And if you don't need to do that, it just has like kind of a nice drape around the front of your neck. I really like how it looks all bunched up like this. You can see a lot of different portions of the fabric. Of course, with the nature of a cowl, whatever's on the back, you can't really see. So however the color changes look along the seam, those won't really get shown. So I don't really know if there's any way you can like control that as you're knitting, like maybe selecting which part of the yarn you cast on with, knowing that that part will be less seen than whatever is in like the middle of your skeins of yarn, which will be kind of like the middle here. And then as you get towards the other end, that's also back towards the seam, so it won't be as visible in your finished project. But I just knit as they came in the skeins. I ended up using 1.5 balls of each of the spin cycle, or 1.5 skeins of each. So that was about 75 grams per color. So you can see here I have left over about 25 grams of each here. And I'm really a big fan of this project. I love the way it looks. I already gushed about the fabric, the colors. The knitting process was super enjoyable and super fun. It is an easy project to memorize the pattern for, so it was great on the go. And it's also like small enough where it's pretty easy to bring in a purse or a bag somewhere. And like I said before, the color changing yarns just really kept me engaged and wanting me to continue to work on it and see how the colors were going to knit up. I don't think I have too much more to share about this. Big fan, would recommend any of the Andrea Mowry cowl patterns that have this style, like the Traveler or the Shift cowl. I do want to make the Traveler cowl next. I have some yarn in stash that I'll probably use for that. I don't imagine myself wearing this too much until it gets to be cold again in the winter. I do really enjoy wearing these cowls with coats because I feel like it really fills in the gap of where sometimes my pea coats kind of leave like a v-neck gap. So this is really good for extra warmth and of course a pop of color and style. Probably just leave this on for the rest of the episode. Seems like a nice pairing with my Ingrid sweater, so why not leave it on? And now let's get into my works in progress. My first work in progress to share today is the Traveler hoodie. This is also an Andrea Mowry pattern and another pattern that I've been working on pretty steadily for the past few months or the past few podcast episodes. The Traveler hoodie is a drop shoulder design that's knit bottom up. It features this all over kind of horizontal rib pattern that is mostly alternating purls and knit rounds. The big feature, of course, is the hood, but the pattern does include a modification if you just want to do a crew neckline for a regular sweater, and it's meant to be oversized. I'm making size 2 for myself, which will give me 10 inches of positive ease, and it is a cropped fit, and I pretty much knit mine to the measurements of the pattern. I haven't made too many modifications to this, so this body length was what was written in the pattern. I am knitting mine out of Knit Picks High Desert Sport in the color Ponderosa Heather. This is a 100% American wool yarn from Knit Picks. It is a blend of merino and rambouillet. Since you last saw this, the main thing that I have done is started the first sleeve. So I did talk a lot about the hood in my previous podcast episode, so if you want to hear all about the hood, I would turn you towards podcast episode 52. But getting to the sleeves, they are pretty straightforward. This is a drop shoulder design, so I had this sleeve opening here that I just picked up according to the pattern. I did note in the pattern it didn't really give a rate of pickup, so I kind of had to calculate how many stitches to pick up per row based on how many rows that I had here. And the sleeve decreases, I find it interesting that Andrea Mowry writes them as per inch or per like length. So I did have to kind of do some own math before I started the sleeves to figure out my row gauge and how that would equate to how many decreases per number of rows, just because I pictured myself you know, counting rows rather than like measuring how many inches I had knit before doing the next decrease. I also knew that I would probably want my sleeves to be a little bit shorter than what was written in the pattern, just as I always have to decrease my sleeve lengths compared to most standard patterns. So I did use a previously knit drop shoulder sweater to kind of lay underneath this and kind of measure how long I would want my sleeve to be. With this pattern, there is a lot of growth that will happen with blocking. You can kind of see the compressed sleeve right now, and it's really going to do this once it's finished. Andrew Mowry in the pattern does provide a percentage of growth rate, which I think is helpful, and I did use that in my calculations before deciding ultimately what my decrease rate would be per row. So a little bit of homework there. I think if you're not making a sleeve modification, maybe you don't have as much homework to do. I'm assuming that if you're like me, you would rather have a row count for decreases rather than a measurement count, so you will have to kind of figure that out based off of what you've knit already. I did also find it interesting that the pattern writes to just do the decreases on the knit rounds rather than the purl rounds. So I thought that would be a little bit difficult to keep track of, because if your decrease round count isn't an equivalent number to the pattern stitches, then you would have to like skip some rows and then decrease on the next knit row. So again, I just thought that would be too confusing to keep track of, so I just decided that, hey, I can do a decrease on a purl row, no big deal. So I am keeping a steady count of decreases to my sleeves, and whether it's on a knit round or a purl round, I'll just do it knitwise or purl-wise. It isn't that complicated to do that change. So at this point in time, I've actually finished this sleeve in terms of the body knitting. I will just need to do the ribbed cuff. At this point, this is long enough according to my measurements, and that does lead me to believe that I should just continue and do the cuff, and then once it's all blocked, as long as my measurements were good, we should have an appropriately sized sleeve. I know there were a lot of recommendations to me to block the sleeves before knitting the cuff, and then use that opportunity with this still being live to either add more rounds or pull back some rounds before finishing with the ribbed cuff. I do think that's a great idea. I feel like I just don't love the idea of blocking it with the live stitches. Like, I'd rather just risk it and finish off the sleeves and then have like a whole blocking transformation for the finished sweater. But we'll see what happens. I think I am just going to knit the cuff and then show you how it blocks out. So that's my traveler sleeve. Of course, once I finish this sleeve and then do the other one, I'm gonna be done with the whole project. So really coming to an end here with this sweater. I also really enjoyed it, even though it was knit bottom up. I did find a lot of enjoyment in the process. I think there was enough going on where it kept me engaged, but it wasn't too complex that it kind of deterred me from working on it. So I still really love working on the traveler, and I'm really excited to have it finished. But I think it's gonna be a really fun sweater to have in the end. My next work in progress is the Franky Sweater by Sanus Garn. This is mine so far. So the Franky Sweater is a top-down raglan sweater. It's pretty oversized and features a long stretch of twisted rib at the end. The suggested yarns are kind of fluffy yarns from Sanus Garn, like Borstet Alpaca or Kos, and I am knitting mine out of this really fun bright blue color from Ruby and Roses. This is Glowing Indigo on the Rose Cloud base, which is a lace weight baby alpaca, baby Surrey alpaca on a silk core. So I am holding 2 strands together to get the bulky weight gauge. I believe the gauge of this pattern is 16 stitches per 4 inches. I am knitting mine on 4.5mm needles to meet gauge, and am making the smallest size for myself in the pattern, which this sweater is very oversized, and knitting the smallest size should give me like 16 inches of positive ease at the body, but I did do a modification at the underarm to significantly decrease the amount of stitches that were cast on at the underarm and picked up, so that should remove about 5 or 6 inches of ease on it. So ultimately my Franky Sweater should have around 10 inches of positive ease. Now the Franky Sweater has a very wide raglan construction. It is compound raglan, so the sleeve and the body rates are different, and there are a couple different sections of different increase rates, so it does create a very like wide drop off that kind of goes like this. You might be able to see it here. So although it does get very wide in the body, the yoke is actually not very deep, as opposed to some other raglan patterns I've knit that also have like 10 to 11 inches of positive ease, but they're not compounded. So the body is wide, but also the yoke length is really, really deep. But I'm glad with this pattern, I don't really have the issue of a really deep yoke. I have spoken about not loving super oversized raglans, and looking back on them, I do think it was more because of the deep yoke rather than the width of the body. So I think that this pattern is kind of a good middle of that concept where it does have an oversized body but not a deep yoke. So I think I will enjoy the fit of this a little bit more than some other really oversized raglans that I've made in the past. So at this point I have started the twisted rib for the bottom hem. The pattern does call for the twisted rib section to be about 8 inches, and knowing that I want this to be well proportioned on me, I'm not knitting it to the actual length of the sweater in the pattern as written. So I did start my ribbing pretty early, and I'm probably not going to make it 8 full inches, maybe like 6 inches. I'm just honestly knitting it until I feel like it's a good length to cast off. I will say the twisted rib is not the fastest, but I don't really find it uncomfortable. I've never had that many issues with twisted rib. It's slow, but I don't hate it. So I've kind of been enjoying working on this. It's kind of nice that I can just pick this up at any time and just work on it without thinking. I did say that I was going to add the collar before I started the bottom ribbing, and honestly I totally forgot to. I just kept knitting on the body and then started the ribbing and then realized that I forgot the collar, which is fine. There's no rules that you have to do it ahead of time, but I tend to like to make mine ahead of time. So maybe when I run out of a ball of yarn here at the bottom hem, I'll jump ahead and add the collar. I do think the collar is also twisted rib. I can't honestly remember, but I would be surprised if it isn't twisted rib. And it is a folded collar, so it will really bring in the neckline and kind of give this sweater a finished look before I even get to the sleeves. So that's my Franky sweater. Love this color, love the yarn. It's just so satisfying. Everything about this is just so fun to knit, and it's really fun to kind of see that twisted rib texture show up. Of course, this being a very fluffy yarn, any stitch definition is going to be pretty lost, but I think the twisted rib does really help give it a little bit of dimension, and it's not invisible, it's just very blurred, and I think it's a really cool effect. I don't have too many sweaters that are all fluff, so it is really nice to have this on the needles, and looking forward to adding it to my knitwear collection soon. I have one more project on the needles to share, and that is a new cast on, and I have cast on the Maggie Cardigan by Petite Knit. I've been wanting to knit this for a while since it came out, and I've had the yarn in stash for a while, so I'm really excited to finally have this on the needles. The Maggie Cardigan by Petite Knit is a top-down cardigan that features a crew neckline knit in all stockinette stitch. It is a sport weight knit, and the recommended yarn is Cardiff Cashmere Classic. I am using Sorella Yarns Classic DK in the color Audition, which is a blue leaning black. This is a 100% superwash merino yarn in a DK weight. So even though this is a sport weight pattern, I am still meeting gauge with the DK weight yarn just because I am a tight knitter. I am also making size extra small for myself, where normally I would probably knit size small for petite knit patterns. So knowing that this is at a little bit of a larger yarn weight, I think in the end the fit will turn out just fine. Now the Maggie Cardigan is a short sleeve cardigan, but I'm planning to knit mine long sleeve, and this is a top-down design that features English tailored shoulders and sleeves, so it creates kind of a set-in sleeve look, but it is knit completely seamlessly. So this is the back of the Maggie Cardigan. You can kind of see the construction. It is a little bit similar to a drop shoulder where you start with the back panel first, but it quickly diverges into a different kind of construction where you do pick up for the sleeve cap here and do a different rate of increases on either side of the sleeve to give that sort of sleeve shape. You can kind of see like the shoulder cap here. This is the front of the cardigan, and it kind of creates a straight line going down. Same with the back. There is kind of like a straight line going down as the sleeve is forming. And you might be able to see here the front neckline shape with that curved crew neckline. And now at this point for the neckline, it's been shaped so the rest of the front panel is knit straight down. So hopefully that made sense. I think the pattern is pretty well written where if you just follow the pattern, you know, place your markers at the right spots, it does kind of knit up itself. I am in the middle of a row, which is unfortunate for showing off in the podcast today, but this is a construction I've made before in the poppy tee and really enjoyed it, and I'm still really enjoying it for this pattern here. I'm knitting mine on 4mm needles and really enjoying the knitting experience. I am just starting to introduce a second ball of the yarn here as I'm about 75% way through the first ball. This is hand-dyed yarn, so I am going to be alternating skeins the whole project just to give it a blended look and avoid any harsh lines. That's probably it I have to share about the Maggie cardigan. Again, not much to it right now. Will be interesting to see once I split for sleeves how the fit looks, and I haven't even thought about buttons. I always tend to worry about buttons after the fact. Like once I have the finished piece, I kind of look at it and then kind of figure out what kind of buttons I want. But I'm really looking forward to having just like a dark neutral cardigan that I can wear either as an accessory on top of some other clothes or as its own top buttoned up. I think it'll have a lot of versatility in my wardrobe, and I haven't knit a cardigan in a really long time, so it's kind of nice, but also, you know, knitting flat can only be so nice. I'm enjoying it so far. So those are all the projects I had to share in today's episode. Not too much progress. I feel like my knitting has kind of been slowing down, just life has been getting busy. As the weather is getting warm, I'm getting really excited to spruce up our yard, do some landscaping, and start a garden. Having an outdoor garden has always been like a dream of mine, and I've never had the opportunity to do it until we owned this house. So that's of course been taking up a lot of my extra time, and as soon as the sun comes out, you know, I'm trying to be outside more and less sitting. So knitting has slowed down a bit, which is completely fine. I love the fact that I can pick up knitting whenever I want. It'll always be there for me, but I don't need to feel like I'm constantly knitting all the time to enjoy some free time. That being said, I do have some exciting plans for new cast-ons in the future. I have yet to put out a spring knitting plans video because I feel like I'm just chugging along with all of my sweaters from the winter. It feels a little silly to bring up a list of all these new cast-ons that I want to make right now because I still have a lot on the needles, and I might combine like a spring into a spring and summer planning video. I do have some yarn coming in for some summer projects, including some summer crochet projects. I have some beachy trips planned, so I think that'll kind of be upcoming in the future, maybe spring and summer plans, we'll see. But also on the channel, if you haven't been caught up, I do have a new video reviewing my more recently knit t-shirts. It was kind of a part 2 to a video that I filmed 2 years ago. So fast forward to today, I have 2 years worth of knit tees to share my true feelings about them, whether or not I actually wear them, and if they were worth it or not. I do also have a new video out reviewing a bunch of yarns from Holskarn, which was a really exciting project for me to do because I have always wanted to try Holskarn, and they were really kind to send me a whole bunch of their different yarns to try. So I literally took all the yarns, I made a bunch of swatches, I blocked all the swatches, I did combos of their yarns, and it's all for you to look at in the Holskarn review video. And if you're interested in any of the yarns, they were kind enough to offer a coupon code, so just wanted to share that with you. Amy10 is the coupon code. It will give you 10% off your purchase at holskarn.dk, which is their website. They do ship around the world, and the coupon is available for anything except for stuff that's already discounted. So be sure to check out that video if you've been curious about Holskarn. My goal with that video was just to show you what the yarn looks like in person if you haven't gotten a chance to see it in person. I will also share that Sorella Yarn is having their Disneyland pre-order this upcoming weekend. April 10th is when it opens, and it'll be open all weekend. The Disneyland collection is a returning collection that they had done a few years back, and I actually used some yarn from the Disneyland collection to knit my October sweater. You might be familiar with this finished piece. I do wear it a lot and talk about it a lot. This is the color People Mover that is on their cashmere sock base. It's a variegated that features some light blues and some purples, and is a pretty subtle variegated. And in this sweater, I did pair it with an Essayer mohair in in the color 41, which is a light blue color, and just really had a fun time making the sweater, and I still wear it a lot. The cashmere sock base does take dyes a little bit more softer and more blended than their 100% superwash yarns. So if you are looking at People Mover, just keep an eye on the base. The one I have here is maybe a little bit more washed out than some of the other bases that they'll be offering. I do also have the color Tomorrowland here, which I have yet to use. This is on their old nylon sock base, and it's this light lilac purple color, pretty vibrant and fun. Their nylon sock base has changed to now be a 4-ply sock yarn, which I'm super excited about because I have always been a fan of 4-ply sock yarn over 2-ply sock yarn. I do find that 2-ply sock yarns just get a little bit more fuzzy more quickly compared to 4-ply that has a little bit more durability, and their nylon sock also comes in a DK weight now with the same blend of nylon and superwash merino wool, also 4-ply. So that is upcoming April 10th. I have an affiliate link for you to shop in my description of my YouTube videos, or you can find my link on my Instagram bio. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed watching and knitting along if you're working on a project. I would love to hear what you were working on, so feel free to leave me a comment below. Subscribe if you like what you saw and want to keep up to date with all my new videos, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.